this is going to be a very interesting conversation, except for Charlene, who I've only had email communications with to this day. It's great to meet you virtually in person, Charlene. And thank you so much. I know you had a crazy day and you still made it. I appreciate that. And I've
It's a
got,
board meeting day, so I'm triple tasking today. But
well, and thank you so much. And Eva, it's been a minute since we actually seen each other in person. Mario, Jeffrey, I think we saw each other recently. We're going to continue with the vein of questions we've had earlier, and I hope you had a chance to hear those. Because, um, but I'm going to start at a high level with what Charlene and the COG do. And if Charlene, you can just take 1 minute, because a lot of people don't realize the COG exists, and I want people to know. You can go to their COG, and we actually throw up your stuff on the resource page. So go ahead, Charlene. Take a minute and explain to us who the COG is.
yeah, I mean, I specifically work for the National Capital Transportation, National Capital Region Transportation Planning Board, which is the Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO,
Right.
for the Metropolitan Washington region, and we are housed in the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, which is, we're technically a nonprofit. We're a member agency of regional governments, and we have mostly local, and then we have state and federal reps on our transportation planning board. And when I describe my job to people, I basically say I try to get 3 states to play nice with each other to do regional planning. I'm in specifically transportation planning, and we do have federal requirements on what we have to do and how we have to do it. And I'll kind of leave it there as far as like how we do that, technology wise. But yeah, a lot of people don't know what we do, except for if there's a bosom action day that's alert goes out, our environmental programs do that. When there's problems about Metro, we tend to get blamed for that, even though because we're the region and Metro is just an agency of ours. We do a lot of survey when you see things on the news about the region's airports are doing this or the region's congestion is doing that. A lot of times it's our work. So it's kind of a high level thing of like what COG and TP do. So hopefully that was helpful.
And I'm so happy you kind of put the framing around. It's a multi jurisdiction activity, and there's a lot of challenges, obviously.
It
But
is. Yeah.
I'm gonna throw the next question over to Eva. First of all, I want to thank Eva for attending this. She's got multiple events going on today. Secondly, for this event, the one of the people who has been thinking about incrementally working to making this happen is Eva Reid. So I want to say thank you first of all, and thank you for making this time. And Eva, uh, I know your work has come a long way from different areas, from workforce development and GIS training to recently we're a chief data officer for a health agency, and and all of that ties together with impacts of environment, impacts of transportation, the data across more jurisdictions. So my question was, I had questions all over the place for you, but I wanted to choose this one. How can organizations overcome data interoperability barriers in public health systems,
Oh,
especially when aiming to build resilient infrastructure? I think that
it's
kind of ties your history a little bit.
it does. It does. That's a good one. So I think there are two pieces to this, and I was thinking a lot about this actually the other day, and there are two pieces to it. There's the technology, and then there are the people. And you really can't have interoperability without both of those things. So there's the I don't know, I'm going to say straightforward, but it's not really. So there's the straightforward, like we have to adhere to standards that are set. Obviously for GIS, we have our standards. There's a whole set of health standards, across the board, including data. We have our federal standards. We have, data governance rules. And I know one of the things that um, before I left the health department, we were really looking at data governance as sort of the next frontier. And I think this, what I'm seeing as I, have changed now and I've moved into the private sector, I'm doing health and I'm doing a lot of other things, and really data, it kind of all comes back to data governance, right?
Yeah.
There is also, I think, that's really important is not just having standards and having technology and understanding how the technologies work together, but I think it's really important to recognize that, there are people that, we manage the data, we make policies around data, we, do all of that, but then we all need to work together. So I think we can't leave out that part of interoperability.
Mhm.
We don't think of interoperability as being about people, because we tend to focus on the, how am I getting data from here to here, and what do I need to know before I try to transmit data from a hospital to a public health agency, for example. You have to have people. And one of the things that I think I keep relearning, I'm not going to say I learned it recently, but I think we keep relearning that we have to build relationships with each other in order to get the work done. I think any GIS professional will tell you that. It is really critical in the health sphere because the nature of health is that we are dealing with protected health information, and we can't share that readily necessarily.
Mhm.
And I mean, there's a whole, I'm not going to get into all the details about that right now. But in order to be able to use someone else's data, we have to have conversations and we have to have relationships that have been built or that are, being built. And, recently, I think we've been talking a lot about sort of these, communities of practice. And I think that's really key in all of this is that if you're not working together and if you're not talking together and if you're not making decisions together, we can't have data that are interoperable. Like it doesn't work. So I really think it's important to not just talk about the technology, but also talk about the people that are involved in this at every level, federal to local, private sector. Everybody needs to be involved to make all of this work. And I think even if it's not healthy, even if we're talking about other things, we've all experienced this. It's not a, it's not a health only thing. We have some extra special things, if I need to be able to share data from a hospital to another hospital or from, paramedics to the hospital kind of thing, it's the technology, but it's also the people.
100%. And I think you hit a key note for me there was that it's building relationships that actually generates the quality in that
Mm-hmm.
data, and you can't have that interoperability without quality and people doing it. So Mario just dropped. There he is. I think you were hiding from me, Mario, because it's coming to you. Mario has in my heart a special place because we worked as cube mates once. Literally, it was a 2 foot cube each, and we were
Those were
just,
not cubes.
I don't know what. Yeah, I'm
Those were
calling
not
them
cubes
cubes and not
at
cubes.
all.
Barney, we need to talk about that later. I think Evie and Jeffrey, you missed those cubes by a few months. But Mario, before you even joined DCGIS, you were out in Maryland, a couple of and your work since then, even in the federal space, has been around data governance as an actual chief data
Yeah.
officer for a federal agency recently, as well as the lead and director of data and the quality. And I'm going to get to you, Jeffrey, because I think some of the stuff you guys work together has enabled some innovations now. But more particularly, Mario, with your extensive background in data governance, what best practices have you found for ensuring high data quality in large geospatial projects? This kind of
Okay.
brings all of your history together, I think.
Sure. Actually, Eva, you touched a little bit on this. It's not just the data or the technology, it's the people, right? And it's really that holistic type of approach. So from my experience, there are two key factors that have really expedited or promoted higher data quality or improved data quality. The first one is knowing the data. It's critical on any data projects that I've been involved with. It's either mapping out, specifying a data set. Some of the early days in DCGIS, we were defining what was in the building polygons, what was in the road casings. Were we going to capture certain types of planimetric features, right? So there was that level of defining the data and what we needed. There's also bringing in data sets. Robert says we're just so inundated with all these different data sets. So there's always now some level of incorporation of an existing data set, whether it's going to be the entire geospatial project or it's going to be a major component of it, right? One of the things that I've been able to at least dab into, but haven't really gotten strongly into, is data profiling. Is the ability of data governance tools that allow some pretty robust data profiling, and profiling in the sense of discovering what's in there. Are there credit card numbers? Are there social security numbers, right? Because somebody may not know the data set. They just know, hey, I'm using this data as part of the system, and I know that the application sheet has this kind of information in it. But looking at the data on the back end and being able to have tools that are out there that can just do an automatic scan of data sets, doing the profiling is critical. One of the recent work assignments I've been on, the data manager said, yeah, we've been collecting data since 2009, but I'm really only confident since 2019, right? So there's that trust perception as opposed to, actual factual based type of trust in the data. And I think that profiling data tools have enabled the ability to start looking at the data from a more objective point of view and really seeing what's in the hood, right? And so also included in that's thorough documentation. Those that have worked with me know that I believe in thorough documentation, and that's a data dictionary, that's metadata, that's a data catalog. I'm famous when I was in DCGIS of saying I don't duck metadata, and I've been on both ends where I've entered information in for a data set, and I've gone to a data set and I've looked at it and go, so where's the metadata? And they go, there wasn't any included with the data set, right? And for me, that's the most frustrating part when I deal with looking at data sets and trying to bring them in to like an enterprise approach. So there's that part, knowing the data. The other part is know the community, right? Know the community that's involved in the project, know the customers and the audience that are there. More critical data quality is who are the data owners, who are the data stewards, who are the data users, right? What are the use cases, the requirements? What are expectations of the data, right? So you get an understanding of the bigger context of the data in a utilization sense as opposed to like a definition and analysis sense of the word. So what that allows is you can incorporate the business operations, the mission delivery, the stakeholder needs into defining the data value within the data set and in relation with other data sets that are part of the project. You can assign roles. It's always about people, tools, and technology, and being able to assign the proper people to the proper roles. And then finally, it's communication, making sure everybody's on the same board, everybody understands the data, what can I do with it, what can't I do with it, and well, I'd like to do this with this kind of data.
I think you hit all the key points that I was looking for in that, and it's a nice segue. On the screen, you're actually right next to Jeff. And Jeff, taking that data profiling, data metadata, going back to what Eva and Charlene talked about from a multi-regional, high quality, and you have PII data and HIPAA compliance requirements and so on and so forth. You have a dual track in my mind. You're a cartographer plus a geospatial data scientist, and some of the data work and topics we just touched on tie back to one of the projects you were involved in recently with the DC Compass, the DCGIS AI implementation, and how does that touch back to these kinds of metadata questions and how was that useful first to enable that AI? Because I think that metadata was a crucial part in my mind. But then also, you're a cartographer, and how has cartography transformed the visualization of how people use and interpret data on the receiving end? Kind of pulling all that together and throwing it to you.
Okay. Well, that's it. Thanks. And I might have to jump back here because I have a tendency to forget multi-part questions.
Well, the cartography on the receiving end, but the AI implementation and data governance and metadata. That's one real big question there.
Yeah. Well, the AI implementation and DC Compass, that's something that I was involved on the edges of at the end of my time there with DC GIS. And what Mario just got done saying was so important, and I really can't like improve on that too much. But the point that you have to have your metadata has to be great. And there was a mention earlier about like your addressing data needing to be perfect. It's kind of the same way with the metadata. As far as the AIs get trained on whatever you put into it, it's a for lack of a better term, it's not garbage in, garbage out, but it's whatever goes in comes out back on the other end. And if your metadata is not perfect, then the AI is going to learn incorrectly and is going to spit back out stuff that's not perfect. So an example that we saw was not having a standardized set of terms to use for some of the metadata. For example, the agency that owned a data set, DC Octo, for example, we would have Octo spelled out as Office of the Chief Technology Officer. We would have DC Octo. We would have DC Office of the Chief Technology Officer. We would have periods in there and not periods in some data sets. And all of that means that the AI is thinking, okay, well, this is different when it's actually all referring back to the same thing. So if you don't have your standards standardized ahead of time and figured out for your metadata, you're not going to get the ultimately great product that you want in the end. So you've got to prior to diving into this kind of stuff, you've got to make sure that you have all of your T's crossed and I's dotted before you can make sure that it's going to work for you.
And the ending of that is, as a cartographer and a practicing cartographer, how have you seen the transformations, including with AI now? Because it's about information delivery at the end of the day.
That's a really good question. When you talk about cartographic standards being applied to things, I guess, it's been a while since I've been, involved in, let's say, academic cartography. But it's not, I don't think that things are changing as much as cartographic ideals need to be the standards that the cartographers have kind of thought up and come up with and studied over the years and tried to apply to maps. It's a matter of communication. It's getting this stuff, getting this information out to folks and making sure that they know how to apply standards to maps, and finding how to get that implemented into the technology. Referring back to Esri and ArcGIS, for years and years you had a thing that that cartographers would talk about complaining about spectral color schemes being applied to maps, and that's where you would just drop a rainbow color scale into something. And there are places where that's great and fine, and there are places where it's actually actively makes maps harder to read. So having people who have learned how to apply cartographic standards to things like folks at Esri have done, and now there are more standardized color ramps that come with the software. So when you're creating a map and you may not have the expertise in the background, but you can have the software punch out something for you that actually is legible and understandable in a way that maybe wasn't in the past. I think we improve on that all the time, and we're seeing that being improved on all the time.
Yeah, it's a tough world now because everybody can throw color schemes on data, and that interpretation is now, based. It's art. It's an art now. And it's in the eye of the beholder, as they say. So now.
Sure. I mean, like the democratization of mapping is fantastic. I mean, this isn't something that should have just been kept in into a small priesthood of people, but there's responsibility that comes along with that, and so it's good that the folks who are responsible for democratizing cartography are also helping to educate folks about how to use it well, and not introduce confusion is a great thing.
Wonderful. So
I want to add something real quick about that.
Yes.
In our world, it's very important as far as color schemes and ramps from an accessibility standpoint, because we try to make our products as accessible as possible for all types of people. So the new Esri tools that have come out with the colorblind schemes have been really beneficial to us, and I'm getting requests more and more to implement as many accessibility features as possible. So,
Charlene, you almost took like 80% of what I was going to ask you there. The 20% was really what strategies have been effective in fostering collaboration among regional agencies to drive the use of shared goals, and obviously colored and schema standards and so on. But what are some of those things? And we're going to circle back. I do have 5 more minutes in this call, so I want everybody to kind of bring that in.
I mean, from a collaboration regionally standpoint, we are more consumers of data than producers. Like, obviously we have our own data that we do with technical assistance and field work and stuff like that. But a lot of things that we rely on, such as the recent National Capital Trail active transportation layer update we did, like we collected data from, all of our member agencies, and then we use that, to produce a product. But so the collaboration, a lot of times, over the years, it's been kind of a mixed bag, honestly. Because the shared, the shared goals that we have for developing these products are tied to our identity as an MPO. So we do have these federal requirements. But that doesn't always mean that everybody else thinks that those requirements, they think they're important because they're, part of our MPO. But like, as far as how to facilitate it, it's been kind of, frankly, it's been kind of frustrating sometimes. And, we've resorted to, in the past, probably 15 years ago now, I was developing a bike map, but we didn't get any data from one certain jurisdiction. So I think I put, maybe it wasn't, it was something, but I put like generic data on their county, and they're like, oh, that's not right. I said, well, we don't have anything. So, and it's a matter of, sometimes I don't want to say shaming people, but,
showing the way.
Yeah, so, but we do try to develop products that are easier for people to give us the data that we need. And we do have a new long-range planning and tip tracking database we call the PIT, Project InfoTrack, but, it is kind of a PIT because we're like updating all the data. So we're trying to make it easier for people and create standards. So when they input projects, certain fields are required. They can't submit if they don't have them. Our mapping tool for that is so much better now. It wasn't the way the platform was. We weren't able to draw future project lines because it was tied to a current street space, and that kind of defeats the whole purpose of a long-range plan. So, making things easier for people to give us data is kind of what we're focusing on. And the collaboration, hopefully when we do put together a lot of these regional data sets from when we do collect it and give it back out through our open data portal, people will see the value in contributing. and then, hopefully the circle keeps going. But winning hearts and minds sometimes.
This is crazy. I just got a little other. It's 1:59. I still have 10 more questions.
That's how these things work.
I'm gonna go ahead and override that for 5 minutes, because I want a wrap up from each person on what you see the history looks like, has looked like, and where we're going next, and we can wrap that down. Because this obviously needs to be a monthly webinar with each one of you, because there's so much information in depth that we need to go into. So I want to say thank you. But Eva, if you can start closing us out with a 1-minute closing statement, so that we, because I had 20 questions literally, to be honest with you.
The history, well, I'm not going to directly answer your question because that's how I roll. It's funny to me. So everyone I know that Geospatial is a very small community, even though it's very large, it's very small, and DMV particularly. Like, I've literally worked on the same team with 2 of the 3 other people on this. We've all worked together in some capacity, all of us, every single person on this call. So I think the history of GIS, particularly in the DMV, has always been a very collaborative one, and I think it will continue to be that. We, as Charlene was saying, sometimes we have to, bring people in slowly, but I do believe that is just going to continue to get better. Yeah. Anyone that knows me knows that I'm really big into community. I'm always talking about community, like different kinds of community. I'm always trying to set up some sort of community. And I think, you'd mentioned earlier that, Ghermay, you and I have been talking about doing something like this for a long time. And I really think that is just so critical, continuing to not just build a community, but finding all the ways that our communities overlap. And I feel like my goal is just to have this giant Venn diagram that's, all these different circles that are connecting somehow for whatever length of time that they connect for. And then maybe that intersection changes, but I can only see GIS, geospatial as a whole, and then in the region, I can only see that being enhanced as we move forward, because I think we have to. That's the only way we can do our jobs. So
awesome. Yeah, again, bringing people along. And we're going to go to Jeff, Mario, and I like Charlene because I think you still have that unifying agency where we've now started. I think almost all of us are in the commercial industry at this point. Jeff, wrap us together, and maybe it's something that's a passion that you're looking for to happen.
I mean, I guess the thinking about everyone's answers here and thinking about the question, and what I see as a necessity for the near future is, as a Washingtonian, we've always had the issue here in DC where, federal representation isn't something we have, and we kind of need to rely on our friends and neighbors in Maryland and Virginia to help pull us along. DC government is very good at a lot of things, and I would say that DC GIS is second to none in a lot of stuff, but without the ability to advocate for the city at the federal level, we're kind of fighting with one hand tied behind our back. And I think, to be frank, that's kind of scary in the coming years here, because we don't know exactly what is going to happen, and we don't know how we're going to be able to fight for ourselves. So we need this community to be able to stick together.
The GIS community, stick it together. DMV. Mario, you've been both federal and local. What is a closing statement that you would like to pass on in terms of looking back or forward?
So I'll take the perspective of data availability. I know that the beginning mantra at DCGIS was we're going to offer our data for free, and I've seen in organizations where they haven't and where they have, and clearly offering it, making it available. So I remember putting creating discs creating CDs with data on it, faxing a data license agreement, getting them to sign it, and they fax it back to us, right? And then I was sitting there building this data catalog in Excel, and I was entering all this information in there. That's probably where octo was spelled 7 different ways with a period or with a dash. Probably my fault, right? And then I see this cloud-based data governance / data cataloging tools, right? And I'm involved in a project that's looking for documenting what data is available, and it just does these automatic scans, and I'm just like, where was this tool in 2001, right? And not only from a technology standpoint, that is data readily available, be it an actual data set or a cache, a map cache, or whatever form that it comes in. It's a given now that data is available and that it's free, right? And that hopefully there's some good documentation with it. And I really just want that to continue, right? I really, the more data that we make available, the more we let people know about the data, just really empowers us, all these organizations, all of us together. And having seen it started here, and now we're just keep pushing forward. I don't have to, no more faxes, no more anything that I have to deal with anymore, right?
I feel you, Mario. I was one of the people requesting those CDs. So sorry, man.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Charlene, as a regional organization, you've heard it.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned already, like we get a lot of our data that we need to create regional data sets are from these open data portals. And, I use DCs all the time. From our perspective now, we're trying to make it easier for, internally collaborating and coordinating to have authoritative data sets available on things like, ArcGIS portals, so people are able to use them and not just, we, quote, download the data one day and then we don't really remember where it was because we don't document, we don't do metadata, and then we lose the source. So my take is a little bit different because I'm looking more internally as far as like having a collaborative nature for our staff, but also still supporting the open data concept because, we do have an open data portal ourselves. It's utilized quite a bit, and we do have we have some references in there to other people's data. Like we had the Capital Bike Shares layer in there for a while because it was cool and it was updated every 5 minutes, and our staff had a need for that, and now I'm slowly building people trying to come into the 90s. I always say, even though that's totally dating myself now. Eva's laughing because we were in college together in the 90s. But we were also having our first bout with like sharing data on CDs. Our clearinghouse product was a CD. It was an ArcView project with a bunch of shapefiles. Now it's one of our hub sites. So we want to continue to support the collaborative nature and the sharing because we benefit from it. And internally, I'm trying to create a little microcosm of that so our staff can benefit. In less than 10 years, we've started, having interactive products as part of our long-range plan products. We have these big reports that are this thick, that are just a bunch of pages with maybe some, photocopy maps. And if we're lucky, they're, new project maps instead of like one that's been used, since the 80s. So, I'm trying to get people to see the benefit of sharing stuff interactively because it does benefit our members and it benefits the public and us trying to tell our story. And, the last thing I'll say is like, you guys all know what the region is like. It's congested. It's probably going to get worse. We have a lot of work to do. And if we can have, geospatial data and visualizations to tell people that like, traffic's going to suck, but it's going to suck a little bit less. And this is how it looks on a map. Like maybe, people won't get so angry at us. So that is all I'll say.
This has been an amazing panel. I know Barney is on standby. You guys are welcome to stay with me and ask. I'm going to throw softballs at Barney, but you guys can throw the hard balls and we can distribute that. But yes, thank you so much, Jeff, Mario, Charlene, Eva. I know we can have this 2-3 hours conversation.